especially from the Little Medicals Youth Club. Welcome once more to Friday night at the World Storytelling Cafe. And today and tonight, depending on where you are in the world, could be day, could be night. New York, it's maybe middle of the day, I'm not sure. And but could you please put your hands together to welcome the man in the bowler hat, Mr. Gary Cordingley.
That's me. Oh, thank you, John. That was such a wonderful introduction. And it's so good to be here and to see everybody. And I'm just going to, I suddenly appeared across my whole screen and the only thing I can see is myself. And for me, that's pretty scary. So I'm just going to put myself right there. And that's better. I can see you all now. I can see your lovely smiling faces. Smile. You're smiling. That's nice. Good evening and welcome to Friday night at the World Storytelling Cafe. My name is Gary Cordingley and I am a storyteller, which is handy because you've come here to hear some stories. And I started a little bit earlier. I was looking through my little box of things and I found my old Jaws harp. Since I was, I don't know, about 8 years old, I used to play something like this and I hadn't played it for a very, very long time. And took it out and I just played it. And as I was playing it, I remembered why I stopped playing it, because as I was playing it, suddenly it snapped to and caught my tongue. And I thought that wouldn't be a very good thing to have tonight as a storyteller, a tongue that's cut and hurting. So that's enough of that for the time being. That is why I put it down 30 or 40 years ago and never picked it up again until today. A little introduction to the Jaws harp. I'm going to tell some stories this evening and I hope you're going to join in with me telling some of those stories. And sometimes you might have to speak. And I don't know if you're all muted, but you are. But I don't know if you know this. If you want to speak and you have a laptop, you can press the space bar and then you can talk without having to go through the whole unmuting thing. Now, I'm going to tell you stories that come from all different parts of the world this evening. And some of them are from Britain and some of them are from other places like Africa. And I thought I might start with a little story from Africa. I'll probably take the hat off soon because, as you can see, it's perfectly fitting like that on top of my head. And if I look back slightly, off it will come. Before we start, I just want to know who's in the room. Everybody who's in the room, if you would press the space bar or unmute yourselves just for one moment. I just want you to say your name out so that I can hear you and I know that you're here. I'll count to 3. I'll give you a few moments just to unmute yourselves and I'll count to 3 and then you speak your name and then I'll have heard it. And even if I don't remember it, at least it's gone in that ear there like that. And it might just come out that ear there like that as well, but at least I've heard it. So I'll count to 3 and you can all say your names together. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3.
Louis. DJ.
Fabulous. That was great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now I know you're all here. That's lovely. So that is my djembe and it's wrapped up like this in its cloth bag so it doesn't make too much noise. But I wanted to start with a little bit of, can you clap like that? Enough of that, and I just wanted to play the drum for a moment to get us in the mood for a story from Africa, a little story about a farmer who one day decided he would go up to the top field and he would dig up his yams. Does everybody know what a yam is?
No.
No? Okay. Do you know what a sweet potato is?
Louis does. Sweet potato, yes.
Yep. Okay, good. And if you don't know what a sweet potato is, it's like a potato. It's rough and it's round and it lives in the ground. Louis, you know what a yam is?
No.
It's like a potato. It's like a potato. And so he decided to dig up the yams. So he went up to the top field and he had his dog by his side and he had his fork over his shoulder. When he got to the top field, he started to dig up the yams. He was digging them up and putting them in a big pile just beside him, digging them. You can see the pile getting bigger and bigger. And that was when he heard the voice. And the voice said, "Oh, so that's the way of it. First of all, you plant us, then you don't bother to weed us or water us, and now you're digging us up. No doubt you're going to boil us and cook us and eat us." And the farmer thought, well, that's a bit strange, because when he looked around, there was nobody there. So he turned to his dog and he said, "Did you just talk to me?" And the dog went, "No, it was the yams." And the farmer, he looked at his yams and he looked at his dog, and do you know what he did? He threw his arms up in the air like this. "Ah!" He screamed and he ran away. Now, running away involves patting your hands on your legs. I'm going to count to 3 and I want everybody to throw their arms up in the air and run away by patting their legs. Ready? After 3, all together. 1, 2, 3. Whoa! And run away. The farmer was running down the road, and as he was running down the road, there was a river by the side of the road, and coming up from the river, there was a fisherman, and the fisherman had over his shoulder a net. And what do you think was in that net? Anybody?
Fish.
Fish, of course. What a good answer. And some of those fish he was going to take to market and sell, and some of those fish he was going to take home and eat. Now, the fisherman saw the farmer running towards him, and he put out his hand and he said, "Stop! Why are you running like that in the heat of the midday sun?" And the farmer said, "Well, first of all, my yams talked, and then my dog talked." And the fisherman said, No, my friend, yams and dogs do not talk." But just then, one of the fish in the net said, "Oh, yes, they do." And the farmer and the fisherman, they looked at each other, and they looked at the fish in that net. And what did they do? After 3, ready, everybody? 1, 2, 3. And run away. They were running down the road, and as they ran down the road, by the side of the road there was a hut, and outside that hut there was a man weaving at some cloth, and he's weaving away. He looked up and he saw the farmer and the fisherman running towards him, and he put out his hand and he said, what did he say? You can all say it with me. He said, "Stop! Why are you running like that in the heat of the midday sun?" And the farmer said, "Well, first of all, my yams spoke, and then my dog. Sorry, John, I jumped ahead of you. My dog talked, and then his
Fish talks.
Fish talked, yes. And the weaver looked at the farmer and the fisherman, and he said, No. Yams and dogs and fish, they do not talk." But just then the piece of cloth that he was working on said, "Ho, yes, they do." And the farmer, the fisherman and the weaver, they all looked at each other, and they looked at the cloth, and what did they do? Ready? After 3, 1, 2, 3. And away they ran. They were running down the road. And as they ran down the road, do you remember that I told you there was a river by the side of the road? Well, the river ran into a lake. And as they ran towards that lake, there was a woman swimming in the lake. And she looked up and she saw the farmer, the fisherman, and the weaver running towards her. And she put out a hand and she said, what did she say?
Stop.
Stop! Why are you running like that in the heat of the midday sun? And the farmer said, well, first of all, my
Dog yap talked.
My dog yam talked. Yes, first of all, my dog yam talked, and then my dog talked, of course, and then his
Fish talked.
Fish talked, and then his
Cloth talked.
Yes, and the woman said, "You don't understand. Yams and dogs and fish and cloth, they do not talk." But just then, the water that she was swimming in said, "Can you do that with me?" Oh, yes, they do. And the farmer, the fisherman, the weaver, and the woman, they all looked at each other. They looked at the water, and what did they do? After three, ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah! And away they ran. Oh, they ran along the road, and the road ran up a hill, and they ran up the hill with it, and the road ran over the hill and into the valley on the other side, and they ran over the hill and into the valley on the other side, and the valley the other side was full of huts. And outside one of those huts was a chair, and sitting in that chair and drinking tea, rhubarb, no doubt, was the chief. And the chief looked up and he saw the farmer, the fisherman, the weaver, and the woman running towards him. And he put out his hand and he said, what did he say? Stop!
Stop!
Why are you running like that in the heat of the midday sun? And the farmer said, well, first of all, my
Dog talk.
dog
Yep,
talked. And what?
and
then
dog.
I am, and then my dog talked, and then his
Fish talk.
fish talked, and then his
Cloth talk.
and then her
Water talk.
water talked. And the chief said, stop, 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 stop. Too much talk, too much talk. If you keep talking like this, you'll frighten all of the villagers away. Now run away before I have you locked up. And the four of them, they turned around and they ran away. And the chief, he sat back down in his seat and he picked up his teacup and he had a sip of tea. Who has heard of such a thing, he said. Yams and dogs and fish and cloth and water talking. Who has heard of such a thing? Well, just then, the chair that he was sitting in said, I know. Who would ever suspect that a yam could talk? And the chief looked at the chair that he was sitting in, and he looked at those four people who were running away. And what did he do? Are you ready? After 3, 1, 2, 3. And away he ran. And they never saw him in that village again. That's the story. Too much talk. Comes all the way from Ghana in West Africa.
Oh.
Thank you for joining in. Even when I couldn't hear you, it was still good to see that you were joining in. That's great. So I had a whole list of other stories to tell. Does anybody here like fairy tales? And when we think of, oh, John, you like fairy tale, that's good. And when we think of fairy tales, sometimes we think of, but I don't know, when I think of fairy tales, I think of Cinderella, or I think of Sleeping Beauty and all those kinds of stories, those big, this is a very tiny fairy tale, very, very, very short, but it's one that I enjoy telling, so I hope you'll enjoy hearing it. Once upon a time, there were two people who lived in a hut, in a cottage at the edge of the forest. They were very, very old, and they were very, very poor. There was an old man and an old woman, and they didn't have much. In fact, they had nothing. They had hardly any furniture. They never had any children, and they didn't have any food, and there was often not enough wood to put on the fire to give them heat or cook their breakfast or anything. And the old man used to sit in his chair all day and complain, there's not enough food, there's not enough heat, there's not enough furniture. And he'd say to his wife, why don't you go out there and find some food for me to eat? Oh, I'm hungry. Go out there and get some wood to put on the fire. I'm cold. That's the way it was. That was the kind of man he was. And the old woman, she used to go, oh, all right then, and she'd shuffle off and do whatever he'd asked. Well, on this particular day, it was early in the morning, the old man had woken up and going, oh, I'm really hungry. Where's my breakfast? And the old woman said, I haven't got your breakfast yet. I haven't cooked it. And he said, well, go and get some wood for the fire and cook me some breakfast. So the old woman, she put on a coat and she shuffled off out into the forest, and she went off and she started collecting some bits of wood off the forest floor. And it was early in the morning, and all the bushes were full of spiders' webs. And I don't know if you've ever got up early in the morning. I never have. But if you get up early in the morning, the spiders' webs are all hanging in the bushes, and sometimes the dewdrops are hanging on the spiders' web, and sometimes the sunshine hits those dewdrops and they sparkle like a million diamonds. Well, there was the old woman picking up some bits of wood off of the floor, and over there in one of the bushes there was a sparkling going on, and she thought it was just the dewdrops on the spider's web, but it kept flashing away. So eventually she thought she'd go and have a look, and when she had a look into that bush, into the spider's web, she saw in the middle of a big spider's web was a tiny little person, with gossamer wings. Who do you think that was? Who might that be? This tiny little person with wings.
Fairy.
A fairy. Yeah, absolutely right. It was a fairy, and she was trapped in the spider's web, and she was pulling her arms, and she was pulling her legs, and she was pulling her wings. But the more she pulled, the tighter she got trapped. The tighter she got trapped, the more she pulled. And just up here in the corner under a leaf, waiting for the fairy to get tired, was a big hungry spider. Indeed, John. And the old woman, she thought, well, I can't have that. So she reached out and she picked up that fairy, and she pulled the fairy out of the spider's web and held out her hand, and the fairy stood on her hand and brushed down the web from her arms, and brushed off the web from her wings, and brushed off the web from her legs. And then looked at the old woman, and she said, thank you so much for saving my life. I couldn't even wish my way out of that situation. You've come along and saved me, and I want to reward you. I want to reward you by giving you something. I'd like to give you 3 of these things. 3 of these things. What do you think the fairy gave the old woman 3 of? Anybody?
Wood.
Lots of good answers there. Somebody said wishes, and wishes is, of course, the right answer. 3 wishes. Although she might have given her 3 bits of wood as well, and they would have been just as useful. Or maybe not. And the old woman said, well, what should I wish for? And the fairy said, I don't know what you should wish for. You have to think about that very carefully, but think about this. Whatever you wish for, it will come true. And then the fairy was gone. And the old woman, she ran back to the cottage. Well, when I say ran, she kind of like shuffled back to the cottage. Well, when I say shuffled, she sort of hobbled back to the cottage. When she got there, her husband, he said, where's my breakfast? And the old woman said, don't you worry about your breakfast. My goodness. She told her all about the spider's web and all about the 3 wishes. What are we going to wish for? She said, what are we going to wish for? And the old man said, I don't know. I have 3 wishes. I've never had 3 wishes before. I wish we had the world's biggest sausage. And there on the table was a huge sausage. Possibly, actually, the biggest sausage in the whole wide world. And the old woman, she looked at her husband and she said, you could have wished for anything. You could have wished for a palace. You could have wished for all the money in the world. You could have wished to be young again. And you wished for the biggest sausage. You are a sausage. I wish that sausage was stuck to the end of your nose. And there it was. The world's biggest sausage stuck to the end of the old man's nose. And he tried to pull it off, but it wouldn't come off. He twisted the sausage and it wouldn't go anywhere. And he pulled the sausage and it wouldn't go anywhere. And the old woman, she came across and she wrapped her arm around the sausage and she pulled and she twisted, and that sausage was going nowhere. It was stuck to the end of his nose by magic. What are we going to do? Said the old man. I can't walk around with one of these stuck to the end of my nose forever. The old woman said, I don't know what we'll do. And then she went to the kitchen cupboard. And she opened the cupboard and she reached in and she took something out of the cupboard. What do you think it was?
What do you think she took out the cupboard?
Oh, what? Sorry?
Food.
What? DJ, what did you say? I missed that.
A knife? I hope not.
It was a knife, of course it was. And the old man, he looked at her and he said, don't come anywhere near me with that big sharp knife. I wish the sausage was back on the table. And poof, there was the sausage back on the table. And you know, they could have wished for anything. They could have wished for all the money in the world. They could have wished for a beautiful palace. They could have wished to be young again and to have children and anything. But they didn't get any of that. What they got was a big, big sausage breakfast, dinner and tea for the rest of the week and possibly the week after. But at least they enjoyed that. I'm glad you enjoyed that. That's a story that travels around the world. I'm sure that other people tell it, but it's a good fun story. And whilst we're on wishes and how we should use our wishes wisely, here's a story about Jack and some wishes as well. Do you mind having a story back to back with some more wishes in it? Would that be okay with everybody, Isabella and Laura? Oh, I missed what you said then.
Jack and the Beanstalk.
Ah, Jack and the Beanstalk. Yeah, I mean, no, it's not that story, but good that you know Jack and the Beanstalk. No, it's not Jack and the Beanstalk, but maybe it's the same Jack. Maybe it's the same Jack when he grew up. And when he grew up and he took up a life as a fisherman. Now, my good friend Taffy Thomas, he told this story to me, and he's told it to a lot of people, but he told this to me and I heard it and I thought, that's a great story. When Jack grew up, he decided to be a fisherman and he got married to his wife, let's call her Mary. And the two of them, well, they lived by the edge of the sea. They lived in an old ramshackle shack that was so broken at the edges and falling apart that if a strong wind had blown in the night, it would have knocked the old shack over. And this was the kind of fisherman that Jack was. You'd wake up in the morning, pull back the curtains and look out the window. And if the sky was full of clouds, you'd say, I can't go fishing today. There's too many clouds in the sky. And he'd roll over and he'd go back to sleep. Or he might wake up in the morning and open the curtains, look out the window, and there's no clouds in the sky. He'd say, I can't go fishing today. There's no clouds in the sky, not enough. And he'd roll over and go back to sleep. And then one day, Jack's wife, Mary, she said, Jack, you're just a lazy lump. And get out of that bed and go out there and catch some fish. And don't you come back till you've got enough fish to turn into a big bag of gold. So Jack, he got up, he put on his hat and he put on his coat and he went down to the beach and he climbed into his boat out to sea. And when he got halfway to sea, he picked up his net. And you can pick up your net with me. Louis, pick up your net. Like that. Ready, everybody, pick up your net. And after three, throw it out into the sea. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Swoosh! Raw, great throwing. And then he pulled it back in again. You can help me pull that net back in again. He pulled the net back in and he emptied the net onto the floor. And all that was there in the floor of his boat was a great big fish. And that big fish looked up at Jack. And Jack reached for, because this is the nasty bit about this story, if you go fishing and you want to eat the fish or sell the fish or keep the fish, you have to hit it on the head and kill it very quickly. Not nice, but that's the way of it. And Jack, he had a hammer that he called the priest, and he reached around to get that hammer, and the fish called out and said, no, Jack, you don't want to do that. Today's your lucky day. You caught me, a magic talking fish. And if you spare me my life, I'll grant you a...
Wish.
Yes, a wish. Well, said Jack, I wish I had a big bag of gold. And the fish said, well, if that's all you want, just put me back in the water. So Jack picked up the fish, put it back in the water, and away it swam with all its scales glistening in the afternoon sun or the morning sun. And Jack thought, oh, what a fool. I just put that big, big fish back in the sea. And I go, oh, no, what am I going to do? And he sat down on his seat and when he looked, there was a big bag on the seat where he'd been sat. And he reached down and he picked that bag up and he opened it. It was quite heavy and he opened it and he looked inside it. What do you think was in there?
Gold.
Yes. Yes, it was gold. And so he sailed straight back to the beach and he walked along the beach to his cottage, and there was his wife stood at the door. She said, Jack, you haven't been out there long enough to catch enough fish to turn into a bag of gold. And she was just about to carry on, and Jack said, don't worry about that. look at this. And he went in and he put the bag on the table and he opened it up and they looked inside and the gold glistened there. Jack's wife said, you did well, Jack. You did very well. And she was happy for about an hour. Now, it's not because Jack's wife was a bad woman, and it's not because Jack's wife was a greedy woman. None of that. She'd just been thinking about it, that's all. And she thought about it, and she called Jack in and she said, Jack, you caught a magic talking fish. And of all the things in the whole wide world that you could have wished for, you only wished for this bag of gold when you could have wished for a beautiful house. A beautiful house with iron railings all around and a big iron gate, and for servants to be coming and going, and for you to wear a fine suit with a beautiful fitted top hat, or bowler hat in this case. And Jack said, well, I never thought about that. And his wife said, well, you get up in the morning, you catch that fish and you make that wish. So the next morning, Jack woke up early. He put on his hat, he put on his coat, he went down to the beach and climbed into his boat and he sailed out to sea. And he got halfway out to sea and he picked up his net. And you pick up your nets with me, everybody. Pick up your net. And after 3, ready, 1, 2, 3, swoosh! He threw out the net into the sea and he pulled it back in again. And when he pulled it back in again and emptied it into the bottom of the boat, there was the great big fish looking up at him again. And Jack reached around for the priest, for the hammer, and he just about to bring it down on that fish's head. And the fish called out and said, no, Jack, you don't want to do that. Today's your lucky day. You caught me, a special magic talking fish. If you spare my life, I'll grant you a wish. And Jack said, well, I wish me and my wife lived in a beautiful townhouse with iron railings and servants come in. She had a beautiful frock. I don't know if I mentioned that before. And I had a fine suit with a lovely hat. And the fish said, well, just put me back in the sea. So he picked up the fish, put it back in the sea, and away it swam. And Jack sailed back to the beach and he walked back to his shack. The shack was gone. Beautiful house, iron railings, servants rushing all over the place. Standing at the gate in a beautiful frock was his wife. And when he reached up to take off his fisherman's hat, oh, that's a nice bowler in anybody's books. And his wife looked at him and she said, Jack, you've done well. You've done very well. And she was happy. How long was she happy for? 5
Days.
5 days? 5 minutes? I'll tell you the truth. It was an hour. And it's not because she was greedy, and it's not because she was a bad woman at all. It's just she'd been thinking about what just happened. She called Jack and she said, Jack, look, you caught a special magic talking fish who gave you a wish. And of all the things you wished for, you only wished for this, when you could have wished for a beautiful, beautiful palace with high towers on 4 corners and the guards walking around the ramparts and then standing at the gates, and for me to be queen and you to be king, you to be king. And Jack said, well, I never thought about that. And his wife said, well, you get up in the morning, you go off and in your boat and catch that fish and you make that wish. So Jack got up early in the morning, he put on his hat, he put on his coat, he went down to the beach, climbed into his boat and he sailed out to sea. And he got halfway out to sea and he picked up his net. You pick up your nets with me, ready? 1, 2, 3, throw them out to sea, swoosh. And then he pulled them back in again. When he pulled them back in again, what do you think he had in the bottom of the boat?
A fish.
One big fish. And that fish lay there looking up at him. Jack reached around for the priest, and the fish called out and said, no, Jack, you don't want to do that. Today's your lucky day. Today you caught me, magic talking fish. If you spare me my life, I'll grant you a wish. And Jack said, well, I wish that me and my wife lived in a beautiful palace with 4 high towers and guards going around from tower to tower and standing at the gates, and for my wife to be queen and me to be king. Well, said the fish, that's all you want. That's easy enough. Put me back in the sea. So Jack picked up the fish, put it back in the sea, and away it swam. He sailed back to the beach and he walked along the beach to his townhouse. The townhouse was gone. Beautiful palace, guards were on. Standing at the gate, there was his wife. She was dressed to all the world like a queen, beautiful crown, beautiful gown. And Jack reached up to take off his fisherman's hat. Oh, that was heavy. Oh, you big gold jewel-encrusted crown with rubies and sapphires and diamonds. Jack's wife, she said, "You've done well, Jack. You've done very well." And she was happy. Do you know how long she was happy for?
Not very.
1 hour. You're right. If anybody said an hour, 1 hour. Somebody might have just said, I didn't quite catch it. It sounded like not very long. And I have to tell you this again. It's not because she was greedy. It's not. It's not because she was bad, because she wasn't a bad woman. She'd just been thinking about it. That's all. And she said, "Jack, you caught a magic talking fish and granted you a wish. And of all the things you could have wished for, you only wished for this. When really what you should have wished for was command of the fishes of the sea, of the animals of the land, and the birds of the sky, and the starry heavens themselves, and for you and me to be God." Jack said, "I'd never thought of that." And his wife said, "Well, tomorrow morning you get up, you catch that fish, and you make that wish." So Jack got up in the morning, he put on his hat, he put on his coat, he went down to the beach and climbed into his boat, and he sailed out to sea. And he got halfway out to sea, he picked up his net. "You pick up your net with me, ready?" And after three, throw the net out, ready? 1, 2, 3, swoosh! He threw out the net and he pulled it back in again. And when he pulled it in, there, lying in the bottom of the boat, was fish. Yeah, absolutely right. And Jack, he reached round for the priest. It was funny, it was the same fish, but he reached round for his hammer. The fish called out and said, "Jack, no, you don't want to do that. Today's your lucky day. Today you caught me a magic talking fish, and if you spare me my life, I'll grant you a wish." And so Jack said, "Well, I wish that me and my wife had command of the fishes of the sea, the animals of the land, the birds of the sky, the starry heavens themselves, and for me and her to be
Happy.
happy." Is a good answer, but the ones that God, absolutely right. And the fish said, "Well, if that's all you want, just, put me back in the sea." So Jack picked up the fish, put it back in the sea, and away it swam. And then he sailed back to the beach and he walked back to his big palace. And do you know what? Palace was gone. And you know what was in its place? An old ramshackle shack falling apart at the corners. And do you know that if a strong wind had blown in the night, it would have knocked that old shack over? And standing at the door with her hands on her hips, looking not very happy, was his wife. And she said, Jack, what have you done? What have you done?" And Jack said, "Well, wife Mary, I think we had one wish too many. If we'd have just been happy with the things that we asked for, we would probably have them still." So they went back to their old way of living. Jack would wake up in the morning, he'd open the curtains, he'd look out the window, and if there was lots of clouds in the sky, "I can't go fishing today, there's too many clouds in the sky," and he'd roll over and go back to sleep. And if he woke up in the morning, pulled back the curtains and looked out the window and there was no clouds in the sky, "Can't go fishing today," he'd say, "Not enough clouds in the sky," and he'd roll over and go back to sleep. And do you know what? If they didn't die, those two, they're living to this day. And that's the story of Jack and the wish fish.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Where are we up to in time?
Well, you've got about 10 minutes, and you can stretch that 10 minutes if you want, Gary. Okay,
I won't stretch it too far, but I'll definitely give you another story here, which is an old favourite of mine, and this probably take up 10. It'll probably stretch it a bit. So let's see how we get on, shall we? And we'll see where we are at the end. This is a join the in story as well, so please feel free to join in at the right moments, of course. Join in at the wrong moments if you want, but I prefer it if it was at the right moments. So this is a story from Norway, and this is about an old woman who lived on a farm. She was so old. I'll stand up to show you this. I'll show you. Look, just one moment. She was so old, and her back was bent so double like that. Whoa. She could hardly walk around, let alone do the work on the farm that needed to be done, and she lived there all by herself. So she wrote a note one day, and she walked down the lane, and she pinned that note to the post at the bottom of the lane, and then she went back to work on the farm. And this is what the note said: "Help needed. Apply within. which means if you wanted to help the old woman, you had to go and knock on the door. Well, she wasn't back on the farm very long when there came a on the door, and the old woman, she opened that door and she looked outside. Who do you think was out there? Who do you think would come and knocked on her door? Louis, who do you think had knocked on the door? A person, did you say? Yeah, that's a really good answer. I mean, that's almost the right answer and at the same time completely the wrong answer. But it was a good one and I enjoyed it. Thank you. But that wasn't the answer I was looking for. Anybody else got that an answer?
Troll?
A troll is a really good answer as well, isn't it? Of course, because we are in Norway, and trolls live in Norway, as everybody knows. But no, it wasn't a troll. No, there were. I'll give you a clue. They were covered from head to foot in grey fur.
Dog.
Did somebody say a dog? Because that was really close. Here's another clue. Great big eyes, all the better to see you with.
Wolf.
A wolf. Of course. And the wolf said, I understand you need some help around the farm. Have you got any work for me? And the old woman, she looked at that wolf and she scratched her chin and she said, well, maybe I do, and maybe I don't. Can you feed the chickens? Yes, I can, said the wolf. And can you milk the Yes, I can, said the wolf. And can you call the It's coming, isn't it? Louis, do you know what they were?
Sheep.
Sheep. Yes, the sheep. The sheep and the lambs from the top meadow. Yes, I can, said the wolf. Good, said the old woman. Let me hear you. So the wolf took a great big breath and he called out, the woman, she put her fingers there and she said, no, you won't do. You'll frighten all the animals away. Go on, be off with you. And the wolf set off down the lane. Shut the gate on your way out. She never saw that wolf again. Well, not long after that, there came a big knock at the door. The old woman, she opened the door. Ooh, who do you think was there this time? Give you a little clue. Ooh. They were very tall. Any answers? I'll give you another clue. Covered from head to foot in brown fur.
A bear.
A bear, yes, a bear. The way my speakers were there, I thought you said a pear. I was thinking of brown furry pear. I've got a few of those in the bowl over there. They stay solid for weeks on end and then suddenly, poof. But anyway, so, no, yes, it was a bear. And the bear said, I understand you need some help around the farm. Have you got any work for me? And the old woman, she scratched her chin and she looked at that bear and she said, well, maybe I do and maybe I don't. Can you feed the... Yes, said the bear, I can. Can you feed milk the... Yes, Louis, the cow. Yes, said the bear, I can. Can you milk the... not milk. Can you call the bear? Sheep and lambs. Yes, that's right, down from the top meadow. Yes, said the bear, I can. And let me hear you, said the old woman. So the bear, he took a great big breath and he called out. The old woman, she perfect. And he said, no, you won't do. You'll frighten all my animals away. Now go on, be off with you. The bear set off down the lane. Shut the gate on your way out. She never saw that bear again. Later on in the day, there came a at the door. The old woman, she opened that door and she looked outside, and who do you think was standing there now? Are you going to say something there, Louis?
A cat.
Okay, that's a really good answer again, because it's quite close and yet it's miles away. But it's a good answer. I'll tell you what, covered from head to foot in orange fur.
Kitten.
Also good. Try this one, like a dog, but not a dog.
A horse.
Close. Try this. A
frog.
Not a frog. Fox. A fox.
A fox.
Fox. Well done. No help from anybody. A fox. And the fox said, I understand you need some help around the farm. And the old woman, she looked at that fox and she scratched her chin and she said, well, maybe I do and maybe I don't. Can you feed the
chicken?
Said the fox, I can. And can you milk the
cow?
Yes, said the fox, I can. And can you call the
sheep and lamb, goat?
Sheep and lambs and the goats down from the top. Yes, I can, said the fox. Then let me hear you, said the old man. So the fox took a great big breath and he called out, cooey, cooey, sheepy, sheepy, time to come down from the top meadow. You'll do, said the old woman, and she gave him a broom, and he swept the farmyard spick and span. And that old woman, she was really happy with the way things went around that farm for 3 whole days. And then she noticed that there weren't quite as many pigs in the pig pen as there used to be. And she called down Mr. Fox. She said, Mr. Fox, have you noticed that there aren't quite as many pigs in the pig pen as used to be? And the fox said, do you know, madam, I saw 2 of them digging a hole under the fence and running away this very afternoon. And I'm quite sure that by the time the sun sets and it gets dark, they'll be hungry and they'll come back again. And if I was you, I wouldn't even worry. And the old woman, she didn't worry. But the next day, she noticed that there weren't quite as many quack, 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 quack,
duck
on the pond as there used to be. And she called down Mr. Fox. She said, Mr. Fox, have you noticed that it's not quite as many ducks on the duck pond as there used to be? And the fox said, do you know, madam, I saw 2 of them flying off across the fields this very afternoon. And I'm quite sure that by the time it gets dark and the sun goes down, they'll be hungry and they'll come back again. And if I was you, I wouldn't worry about it. And the old woman, she didn't. And that night, when she was laying in her bed, she said to herself, now old fox, he's worked so hard around the farm, I think I'll wake up extra early in the morning and I'll go downstairs and I'll bake him a nice big cake. So she woke up extra early in the morning and she went downstairs, she went into the kitchen and she went to the what we call the larder, which was, in those days, it was a little room at the back of the kitchen. Before we had fridges and freezers and electricity and PlayStations and telephones and all the rest of it, you used to keep your fresh food in the larder. She went to the room at the back of the larder and she took some butter and she brought it out and she put it on the side. And then she went back to the larder and she took some milk and she brought that out and she put that on the side. And then she went to the big cupboard and she opened the cupboard and she took out a mixing bowl and she put that on the side. She got some wooden spoons, she put those on the side. She got some flour, she put that on the side. And in this cupboard up here, she got some sugar, she put that there, and she got some chocolate bits and she put that there. And now she had everything she needed to make a cake, did she not? Or did she not have everything she needed to make a cake? Can anybody think what might be missing? John is drawing a nice picture in the sky. No, I think she had sugar. Yeah. What?
Egg.
Egg.
A bowl.
An egg. Yes. I'm not sure what you said just then, either Isabella, if that was you. What did you say?
Somebody said a bowl and one said eggs.
I said bowl. Lauren said eggs.
Oh, well, then both you and Louis were right. It was eggs. And so the old woman, she went out to the farmyard and over to the chicken pen to get some eggs. And as she walked towards the chicken pen, well, it's a terrible hullabaloo. The roof was lifting up. There were feathers flying in all directions. Oh dear, said the old woman, this looks like trouble. So she grabbed a hold of the broom and she ran towards the chicken pen. And as she ran towards the chicken pen, who do you think came out of the chicken pen?
Chicken.
Fox.
The fox, absolutely. And what did that fox have in his mouth?
Chicken.
just any old chicken, the best egg-laying chicken the old woman had. You old rascal, she said, it was you all the time. She chased that fox 3 times around the farmyard in that direction, and then she chased the fox 3 times around the farmyard in the other direction, swiping with a broom as she went. But that fox, he got out of the way every time. And do you know what? Just by the farmhouse door, there was a big jug of cream, and as the old woman, she took this mighty swipe with the broom, the fox leapt over that jug of cream and knocked it over, and it all went over his hind end. But he didn't stop to worry about that. He ran down the lane with the chicken in his mouth. He didn't even open or shut the gate. He jumped clean over the gate and he ran away, and the old woman, she never ever saw that fox again. Well, that night, the fox was in his lair finishing his delicious chicken dinner and wiping the grease off of his whiskers. And he suddenly remembered the cream on his tail, and he thought that would make a very nice pudding. So he pulled his tail around and he began to lick at the cream on his tail. And as far as I know, he's licking at the cream on his tail to this day, because I don't know about you, but if you ever look at a fox, you'll see that he's orange from the tip of his nose, apart from the black bit, of course, all the way to the end of his tail, except for the big bushy white bit. And now, if anybody ever said to you, how did the fox get his big bushy white tail? You know the answer, and you can tell them the story that I've just told you. And let me tell you this, and it's not easy to see, so I'll show you. That story is as true as I'm standing here now. And if you could see me, you'd see that I wasn't standing. So there we go.
Gary, that was brilliant. And you know, you went all around the world, didn't you?
I probably did.
And you know what Little Miracles have been doing this week? They've been going all round the world. What an amazing coincidence. How was that, Gary? Fantastic.
That's great.
So give Gary a big and you started in Africa, and if you like African stories, at 6 o'clock tomorrow, we've got
Joseph, is it?
Jello, and with more African stories. And you know, if you look around the gallery, you will see Bob. Now, Bob is, guess where he's from? He's from way in the southern states of America, and he's in a very hot place called New Mexico.
Wow.
And it's probably about 100 degrees down there at the moment.
You're just about
So
right.
if you think we've been hot in this country, he'd think that's a nice cool day. And Bob's on Sunday night at 6 o'clock. Meanwhile, if anyone out there, because there's loads more people watching than are just in the house here. Just on the gallery, they'll be watching on Facebook, on this, that, the other. If you want to, because we can't buy Gary, you know, we can't go and buy him cupcakes and coffee and things at the moment, but we can give him the money to get some. So there's a little hat there, and if you want to tip the teller, go to the World Storytelling Cafe site, and you'll see his little top hat, and you can pop something in through PayPal. So that'd be marvelous. Meanwhile, thank everyone who's been in the house. That's fantastic. Zuhar, thank you for driving the bus. And because, as usual, by magic, we started driving the bus in Romania. You know how it works, Lewis, don't you? We start driving the bus in Romania, and then we take it by magic carpet down to Marrakesh, and we drive the bus in Marrakesh. So, by the magic of the World Storytelling Cafe, we go all around the world. Thank you very much. And Gary, thank you. Big round of applause for Gary.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me and being with me.
And next week on Friday, for the Children's Friday, we've got Mark Fraser. And Mark Fraser is a very funny man.
See you all. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
That's fantastic, Gary.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining in. I'll just stay and wave everybody off. That was great, John. Thank you very much for having me on board again.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant.
Okay.
Well,
Bye.
thank you. When things are back normal, you're not far from me, so we must meet up at some point.
That would be great. I'm yeah.
Because I'm in Swindon, and that's sort of southwest. That's in your area, isn't it?
It is.
Storytelling Society. So
I'm the Southwest representative for the.
yes. I read your magazine continuously whenever you put it up. Your
Do I send one
newsletter.
to you?
Pardon?
Do I send one to you? Do I send you an
I
email?
get it on email. I get an email link to it.
Oh, because on my emails they haven't all got names, you see, so I don't know who's on the other end. Yours, I haven't noticed. I'm sorry about that. I didn't see that you.
Well, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
There are a few people on it.
Yeah.
Okay, see you, Gary. Nice
Okay,
one.
take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Out of me coffee now. Bye.